happening, folks? Welcome to the channel. In honor of today's movie, I'm presenting from here in my bathtub, as it was as close as I could get to a dilapidated Victorian mansion. Every month, mostly, I do a deep dive on movies that are important to movies. They can be innovative or controversial or just wildly successful beyond their box office numbers, which don't count for anything anymore since corporations took over Hollywood.
With so many modern movies feeling like a waste of our time and money, I would like to use these episodes to do my part in making sure that great movies never fade into obscurity.
Today's movie was suggested by another friend of the channel's, Mikey Thompson. And he suggested it over 6 months ago, and that should give you an idea as to how backed up I am. So thank you for your suggestion, Mikey, and thank you for your patience. This month's deep dive movie is another cult classic I never get bored of watching. Parts of it absolutely make me want to curl up in a ball on the floor, but it's never boring.
Braindead, also known as Dead Alive in North America, is a 1992 New Zealand zombie comedy splatter film directed by Peter Jackson. It's produced by Jim Booth and it's written by Stephen Sinclair and Fran Walsh. It has two names in an attempt to avoid confusion with the 1990 horror film Braindead by Adam Simon, starring Bill Pullman and Bill Paxton.
It was alright.
In 1992, the meager budget of $3 million was still Peter Jackson's most expensive movie to date by a mile. But despite the critics giving it a lot of positive reviews, it tanked in the box office. But now, in 2023, it has a huge cult following and it's widely regarded as one of the goriest films of all time.
This movie stars
Timothy Baum, Diana Peñalver, Elizabeth Moody, Ian Watkin, Stuart Devaney, and Jed Brophy.
And as it usually is with these undead movies, that's not even including half of the zombie horde.
It's had a lasting impact on the horror comedy subgenre, and its practical effects created a new reference point for gore enthusiasts.
And on top of all that, in cinematic terms, this little gore fest actually launched Peter Jackson's career as a renowned filmmaker. Let me take you through Braindead's plot, and as usual, I will impart everything I know about the movie. And by the time we're done, your brains will be spilling over with all kinds of useless, gory trivia. And just FYI, with movies like this, I always start out including as much of the messiness as I possibly can. And then I let YouTube's evil systems restrict the video over and over and over, because we aren't adults capable of making our own decisions about what we want to watch. And eventually, after all the back and forth, we come to a compromise. So what you end up seeing in these videos is literally as much as I can get away with. So ladies and gentlemen, this month's deep dive video, 1992's Braindead, aka Dead Alive.
The movie opens in 1975 on Skull Island, of all places. We meet zoologist Stuart McAlden, played by Bill Ranston. He's trying to capture a Sumatran rat monkey, which is an animal that resulted from a forced pairing between tree monkeys and rabid rats. His crew of locals are terrified of the thing he's captured, so he's struggling to convince them to even handle the caged beast. And when Stuart's bitten by it, his crew dismembers his still-living body out of fear of what he'll turn into if he survives. But this doesn't stop the rat monkey heading off to Wellington Zoo as per Stuart's original instructions. In Wellington, we meet Lionel Cosgrove, played by Tim Baum, his domineering mother, Vera Cosgrove, who's played by Elizabeth Moody. And if you're the kind of person who notices these sorts of things, you might recognize Elizabeth as Lobelia Sackville Baggins from Lord of the Rings. Lionel still lives at home with Vera in her gigantic Victorian mansion.
I think it is important to point something out. This movie's main focus is to deliver outrageous humor and grotesque visuals. But, like most horror movies worth watching, it also explores several themes. And one of those themes is that of the overbearing mother figure. Just realized I kind of look like the overbearing mother figure myself right now.
In this movie, Vera Cosgrove's relentless attempts to control Lionel's life symbolizes the oppressive nature of certain family dynamics. As the story progresses, Lionel eventually ends up going to absurd lengths to keep his mother happy.
And as a result, she becomes the physical embodiment of everything he's going to need to discard if he's going to have a life of his own by the end of the story.
When Lionel was a child, his father died, saving him from drowning at the beach. The incidents haunted him well into adulthood, and his mother despises him for it. Lionel pops into a local shop where he meets the shopkeeper's daughter, Paquita, played by Diana Peñalver, who went on to do a handful of movies and a few Spanish television series after this movie. Paquita's superstitious grandmother's convinced her she's destined to be with Lionel, so she takes some initiative and hand delivers Lionel shopping the following day. While she's there, she suggests he take her to the zoo for a date, and he agrees with a big smile. But Mother's overheard everything. The next day at the zoo, whilst gazing at one of the ponds, Lionel has a flashback of the incident with his father. So Paquita takes his hand and kisses his cheek, and it's lovely. And then we meet the stop-motion Sumatran rat monkey, and there's nothing lovely about it, as it tears apart a monkey from the adjacent cage and eats it.
Basically, this movie's narrative centers around the Sumatran rat monkey's unintended effects on human beings. And that, of course, is a passing comment on the idea of evolution and moronic human beings tampering with Mother Nature. But the movie never beats you over the head with the idea. In fact, it's usually only people with no wives and children that pick up on all these minute details.
As the young couple enjoy the day in each other's company, the picturesque scene's interrupted by an earth-shattering scream that Lionel recognizes immediately. Mother Vera's followed them on their date, and after tripping on a literal banana peel, she's ravaged by the rat monkey, but after it's buried its filthy rat teeth in her forearm, the tough old bird stomps it into extinction and insists Lionel take her home.
Another theme explored by Braindead, believe it or not, is one of love and sacrifice. Aww. This movie's about Lionel's journey from subservience to independence. And in the middle of all this movie's craziness, you can kind of gauge how far along he is by the way he treats Paquita. And as we've just seen at the start of the story, he's left her standing by herself at the zoo on their first date. A real man would never have done something like that. Real men wait to the third date to disappear.
Back at the house, Vera blames Lionel for forcing her to follow him to the zoo, which is to say the bite is also his fault, so he apologizes and assures her it won't happen again like he always does. Then as he's getting ready for bed, Paquita swings by to bring him his jacket, and Lionel nearly shits himself. He apologizes for the zoo and tries telling her he can't see her anymore, but his feelings overpower him and they end up having a cuddle.
This marks the 22-minute point in the film and the end of the opening act. And as I mentioned earlier, this movie has a reputation as being one of the goriest horror comedies ever made. And from minute 23 right through to the dying seconds of the movie, it earns that reputation over and over and over. And for a little perspective, due to the budgetary restraints and the intricate nature of the special effects you're about to see, the post-production special effects work took several years. As always, I will do my best to get creative with my descriptions, but consider yourselves warned.
Paquita's superstitious grandmother consults her cards, and they tell her dark forces are about to make things hellish for her new fella. And boy, were the cards right. An infection takes over Vera in her sleep, and her wound starts seeping and spurting all around the room. The bite itself grows animated and pulsating, but Vera refuses to bring the doctors in and insists Lionel look after her instead. And right as they're discovering her skin's literally falling off, her dinner guests arrive. Being the bullheaded woman she is, she joins them at the table anyways. She can't speak. She steals her guests' meat off their plates. When the dessert's brought out, her bite shoots pus into her guest's custard, and he eats it. And then her ear falls off into her own custard, and she eats that too. As Lionel's cleaning up his mother's discharge after dinner, Paquita rushes in to warn him he's in great danger, as per her grandmother's fortune-telling. Then they both rush upstairs to Vera's screaming, only to find out she's eaten Paquita's dog, Fernando. Then she attacks Paquita and spear tackles Lionel down the stairs. So the nurse calls an ambulance, but Vera dies. While the nurse is comforting Lionel, Vera comes back to life and pulls the nurse's head off. And the now legendary zombie Vera is born. Or unborn, I guess. And then the nurse goes zombie too, and her head's flapping away like a Pez dispenser. So Lionel stuffs them both into the basement and lies to Paquita, and then she leaves. So he rushes over to the local Latvian pharmacist and gets a boatload of sedatives.
Sedative?
And he brings him back to the basement.
And so begins a routine that repeats itself over and over throughout this movie. And that routine still sends shivers up the back of my legs every time I see it.
And as Lionel opted for the liquid sedatives instead of the tablets, he injects them directly up both ladies' noses and into their brains.
Ugh.
And it works, for now. So he makes use of the downtime and heads around to ask the fortune teller Granny about the dark forces he's about to engage with. And while he's out, voracious Vera escapes the basement. The fortune teller gives Lionel a giant amulet to help ward off the evil, and then he lies again and tells Paquita his mother's in the hospital. Before he can finish the lie, a bus hits Vera's animated corpse and sends her crumpled body flying through the shop window. But fortunately, Lionel's got his hypo handy and he drives it right up her nose again to keep her settled. Just a little little behind the scenes fun. As I am recording this actual voiceover that you guys are listening to right now through this microphone, every time I mention the needle scenes, the nerves run up and down the back of my legs so bad I have to keep recording the lines so you can't hear quivering in my voice. She's taken away for a funeral, and while she's on the mortician's slab, this happens. Then her priest delivers a sermon about the sanctity of motherhood, and behind the scenes, Lionel tries dosing Vera up, but she overpowers him until he can drive that giant needle deep into her face again. And then in the struggle, the pair flies through a window, and Lionel lands with his arms around his mother's corpse in front of the entire procession. So he plays it off like he's heartbroken, and everybody understands. That night, under cover of darkness, he heads to Vera's grave to dig her up to dose her again. But he's interrupted rudely by half the cast of West Side Story, and one of them decides to urinate all over Vera's new grave, so Vera grabs him by the ghoulies and tears his guts out. Then she attacks the remaining Sharks gang members, and that wakes up the priest, who happens to be a kung fu expert who kicks ass for the Lord, and he provides us with the greatest ever zombie priest graveyard kung fu fight ever committed to film.
And if you think you could find a better zombie priest graveyard kung fu fight somewhere else, link me up in the comment section because I don't believe you.
Eventually, the priest is zombified as well, so Lionel brings them all back to the house for lunch, obviously. And if you thought the custard was hard to swallow earlier, try a heaping helping of it leaking from the nurse's neck hole. Then the zombie priest makes a move on the zombie nurse, and, well, then Lionel's creepy Uncle Les swings around unannounced, looking for his share of the house after his sister's death. And then the sounds of aggressive zombie sex interrupt the already awkward conversation. So Uncle Les leaves, and Lionel's left separating the amorous animated corpses as they're literally pulling the faces off each other with affection. As Lionel's out restocking on the tranquilizers, he bumps into Paquita and tells her things are over as he can't face telling her the truth about what's really going on. And when he gets back to the basement, the zombie nurse has delivered a zombie baby after the brief coupling with the zombie priest on the dinner table.
Guaranteed, you will never hear that exact sentence ever again in your life. You're welcome.
So he does the responsible thing and throws it into a stroller and takes it out for a stroll, and it proves to be a lovely day out in the park. On his way home, he sees Paquita with her new boyfriend, and then back at the house, Uncle Les has happened upon his little basement secret, and he thinks Lionel's been doing sexy things with dead bodies. Being a man of character and integrity and Lionel's uncle, he agrees not to tell the police as long as Lionel gives him his inheritance and the house. And when Lionel reluctantly agrees, Uncle Les fills his new place with party guests. Paquita and her boyfriend stroll past Lionel's house and she sees the party going on, so she ditches the boyfriend. Then Uncle Les has a go at her, so she kicks him in the bits and hides in the basement. Then the basement zombie gang gets her, but Lionel saves her, and right when you'd think she'd bolt, she remembers her grandmother's cards predicted all of this was going to happen. And in a heartwarming scene, sort of, relative to everything else that's happening, I suppose, Taquita assures Lionel his mother is not his mother anymore. She convinces him to put her out of her misery, which he does, by driving another friggin' needle full of poison up into her brain.
It's so touching.
He does the same thing with the rest of them, including the poor little baby, and then they join the party. But Uncle Les beats them both up before they can get out of the house. And Lionel's thrown back into the basement where he realizes the poison he used is actually an animal stimulant. And that brings the gangrenous, gory gang back to life with a vengeance, and a plethora of party people get pulled apart piece by piece.
And how was that for a little alliteration?
Cowardly Uncle Les books it out a window while Lionel and Paquita are forced to hole up in a bathroom. Meanwhile, all the party guests have gone zombie too now, and they're making a real mess of the place. Paquita escapes to a closet, and Uncle Les pulls the zombie priest's teeth out one at a time while they're wrestling, and Lionel wrestles with all sorts of enthusiastic opponents himself. This party scene that started around the 1 hour point continues at this pace with more blood and guts and cannibalism than you've ever seen for the remaining 30 minutes of the movie.
As I mentioned earlier, several elements from this movie would go on to prove invaluable on Peter Jackson's directing resume. One of them, obviously, was all the carnage.
With all these special effects flying around amidst the gushing blood and spilling guts, it's easy to lose sight of the amount of work that went into this movie. The budget was low, and that forced Peter Jackson to get inventive with his prosthetics and animatronics and puppets. He also utilized creative techniques like shooting at a faster frame rate and and using miniatures to create the illusion of full-size creatures. A great example of his ingenuity is this infamous and unforgettable lawnmower massacre scene, which utilized a custom-made apparatus to make all of this look real. Ultimately, Lionel and Paquita go on to defeat whatever the hell Mother Vera's turned into, and they have a little kiss to celebrate sticking it out through these tough times. That Paquita's a real keeper, isn't she? Imagine throwing a millennial girl into that scenario. She'd have bolted at the first date at the zoo when all that strong wind messed her hair up.
And there you have it. A funny, gory, surprisingly intelligent, disgusting zombie cult classic that still stands up nearly 30 years after they made it. It's easy to write movies like this off as outrageous gore fests because they are, but it is so important to acknowledge everything Jackson managed to pull off in this movie on a small budget, along with his unique visuals, combined with Braindead's eventual cult following, were directly responsible for bringing about arguably one of the biggest events in film history. The Lord of the Rings trilogy had a combined budget of $281 million, and that was unheard of back in 2001. And Peter Jackson was given the giant franchise for two reasons. He was sincerely obsessed with Tolkien and his works, and Braindead. Without this movie, they never would have handed him the keys to Middle-earth. If you've seen Braindead or Dead Alive, let me know what you thought about it in the comments. And if you haven't, you don't really need to now because I just spoiled everything. Our deep dive next month is Let the Right One In, as recommended by a cheeky friend of the channel, 80s Altar Boy. And as always, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed yourself today, please consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. And until next time, folks. It's me, Johnny, from that video you just loved, and I know you loved it because you're still here, and seeing as you are still here, you should probably go down there and smash me in the face to subscribe, and seeing as you just smashed me in the face, you should probably do something nice to make up for it, like maybe watching this next video. Do it!